Hi, this video is going to explore one of the ways that I color correct my cameras so that the viewer does not notice that there's any kind of a black level change, or in other words, a contrast change, or any kind of a color change between the various models and brands of cameras that I own. I used to have some older HDV cameras. They were all Sony models, but my HDV cameras were getting old and I wanted to upgrade to true 1920 by 1080 sensors. So I purchased two of these Sony NX3s about 3.5 years ago. I bought both of them at the same time. I think the serial numbers are consecutive. They match very well. Very, very pleased with those cameras. However, I had an older Z5U camera, which was an HDV model at the time. I used that for a while, and that matched pretty well. But then I decided I wanted to, upgrade that camera. So about 2 years ago, I purchased this Sony AX100. I wanted to start experimenting with 4K. I heard many really good things about this camera. The reviews were great. And I wanted to be able to utilize a camera like this. It has a 1-inch sensor versus the Sony NX3s, which have three 1/3 inch sensors. I noticed when I started editing between these two different models of cameras that the color didn't quite render the same. So one of the reasons I'm doing this demonstration is because I'm not pleased with the color rendition between the AX100 and the NX3, particularly in the reds. You'll notice here the reds on the AX100, although they look nice, I prefer the color rendition on the 3-chip sensors from my NX3s. To my eye, to be honest with you, I'm not really sure what they really look like, because I film, when you film these recitals, you can't, that's something you can't remember. Well, what did that really look like? But simply by looking at this in post, I kind of prefer the colors of the reds from my close-up cameras better. It's more of a fuchsia red than an orangey red. So I want to match my AX100 to my NX3s. So let me show you how to do that. Let me now go to Premiere Pro, which is my NLE of choice. I still use version CS6. I still don't have a need to upgrade to a monthly prescription plan to get the newest cloud version. This works for me. And at this present time, I don't foresee needing the cloud version. So I'm still sticking with CS6, so I don't have to pay for that, again, for that online subscription. I'm sure the newer versions of Premiere have other features, but I'm also sure that what I'm going to show you will apply to pretty much any version of at least a recent version of Adobe Premiere Pro. If you have a different NLE, whether it's an Apple product or a Sony product, the same thing that I'm going to show you applies. You'll just have to look for the different functions in your NLE to get to the same features that I'm going to show you. If you'll notice on this wide shot from the AX100, the blacks are a little darker than the blacks in the NX3. Now, if you take a look at the curtain on the left-hand side and look at the difference here, I think it's pretty obvious that you'll notice that the AX100 black levels seem to be a little darker. The whole image is a little bit more contrastier than the NX3. One of the things that Louisa Winters, who did a demonstration at the BVA in the spring, I think in the spring or early summer of 2018, she went extensively over color correcting. And one of the first things she focused on was the luminance. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to do that same issue where we're going to take a look at the black level. So I'm going to drop in an effect on this wide shot. So I'm going to go down to the effects panel, video effects, color correction, and I'm going to scroll down to fast color corrector, and I'm going to pull that down on top of my wide shot. I'm going to scroll down here to the bottom of that effect in my effects controls panel, and I'm going to go to output black level, and I'm going to type 8 on the keyboard and click enter. And if you'll notice, the black level has gone up. Let me just hit Control Z to undo. and redo. Let's take a look at the waveform monitor to see how that looks. Before, I'm at 0 on my wide shot with the AX100. After, now I'm up about perhaps 5 units above 0. And I should have told you earlier that the reason I do that is because here's my close-up cameras, my NX3 cameras. If you look at their black levels from those cameras, they do not sit at 0. They tend to sit up a little higher. And I like that. I don't like having the blacks sitting at 0 because you can actually crush the blacks and keep pulling them down and they'll be at 0, but you never know how much you're making those blacks crush. So it's always good to pull up the blacks a little bit above 0 on the scale. So I like the look of my close-up NX3s and I want my AX100 to mimic that. So if we take a look again at this wide shot and just jump back and forth between, again, look at that left-hand side of the screen at the curtain. You'll notice with the black levels brought up on the AX100, matches very well. This is before the change, this is after. Much better match with your black levels. So that's pretty much all I do there with the luminance. If you look at some other footage here that doesn't have those particular types of reds in them, the cameras match very well. I don't notice any real color change when I go between my NX3 and my AX100. Even with that, let's go back to where the curtain's red. Even with the curtain red, if you'll notice here, of course you don't see the top of the curtain on these tight shots, but I don't really notice that the reds on the tops of those kids' outfits are the same kind of change that you'll notice here with these reds, okay? And one of the things I forgot to mention too, whenever you film something like this where the color on stage is constantly changing, you do not want to use auto white. One of the things I always do now, simply dial in on each of your cameras the color temperature, the Kelvin color temperature. So for stage work, I set my color temperature to 3200 degrees Kelvin on all of my cameras, no matter which brand or model. At least I know that that's what, the camera is going to record. It's going to record that color temperature. So as far as the color temperature on shots that don't display those kinds of reds, the color temperature between the cameras is just fine. Let's look at another example here. Here's a wide shot with a different kind of red, and you'll notice here it's such a slight difference you really don't even notice a problem, and the color temperature matches very well. So before you even go into post to do anything, before you even film anything, make sure that the color balance is set to the same color temperature between your cameras. Whether it needs color correcting or not, I always bring the black level up on all of my AX100 footage to match with my NX3 camera. But in this situation, obviously, I need to fix the colors on these costumes. So I try playing around with the fast color corrector, trying to see if I can get those reds, and I'm not having any success here. So that's not a solution. Well, I remember years ago, I watched a video about how to take a particular color and isolate it and make everything else black and white. A lot of people, I think, were doing this with weddings. And I did not do that for weddings, but I recall that the idea of isolating a color was done using the secondary color corrector. So where does that secondary color corrector sit? So in Premiere, it's inside the three-way color corrector effect. So I'm going to pull that down, drop that on top of my wide shot. I'm going to just close this fast color corrector so I can see more of this screen here. I don't want to see both effects paneled open. So here's my three-way color corrector, and if you scroll down, you'll see a line here that says secondary. We don't want to fool with the three-way color corrector functions or any of these wheels at all. We want to go directly to secondary. So I'm going to go there. And under secondary, you'll see a show mask box that you can click and unclick. You'll see a series of eyedroppers, and then you'll see some other layers here. So we're going to get to these and just only really go over the ones that we need to repair and fix this color. So I'm going to go back to my panel here on my NLE. I'm going to look for a nice still frame here of those skirts, those costumes, where I have good lighting and a good color representation that I want to take a sample of. So that's good. I like that. I'm going to click this first eyedropper here, and I'm going to hover over top of the color of that skirt. I'm going to hold my control key down on my keyboard, which makes that eyedropper fatter, which takes a sampling of those pixels, not just one pixel. This is something I learned from watching Louisa Winter's presentation on color correction earlier this year at the BVA. Again, one of the nice things about belonging to the BVA is, and you come to the meetings, is you get to learn some of these ideas from different presenters, and you can incorporate them in your own workflow. Control, left click on the mouse. Here's my sample color captured. The next thing I'm going to do is open up, scroll down 3 of these arrows. And the first one's hue, and then there's saturation, and there's luma. Okay, so we're going to leave the hue one alone for now. We're going to click our box that says show mask, because what we want to do is we want to mask that color. So I'm seeing some masking going on, but it's pretty dirty. I'm not really seeing enough pixels with that color, because I know a lot of these outfits, you can see pretty much a good solid representation of that kind of reddish orange, but I'm not seeing it in the mask so much. So one of the things I noticed was when you do a sampling of this color, it does a good job of picking the color, but under saturation and luma, if you look at these boxes, they're pretty close together. So we're gonna slide these boxes away from each other, and if you'll look underneath, it says start threshold, start softness, end threshold, end softness. We're only going to fool with the thresholds, the start and end. So the left one's the start threshold. You can see these numbers under here change. The right one is end threshold. Again, you can see those numbers change. So we're going to just pull these apart for now. We're not going to worry too much about what we're seeing. We just want to be able to open this up and see more pixels. We want to get that mask bigger, and that's better. We can obviously see that there's more sampling. But we're also seeing, if I hit play on my keyboard here by hitting the space bar, once they start moving, I think you'll notice that not only are we seeing the skirts, we're seeing the floor, which is actually okay because the colors of some of the skirts are on the floor, but we're also seeing some leg and arms, and we don't want to include those in the mask. So now what I'm going to basically do is go back to saturation and luma and play with these thresholds a little more, because I don't want to see legs, but I do want to see the skirt area. So we're going to just go back and forth. And when you're doing this, you want to make sure that you pull all the way down to where you're starting to, like I guess you could say, close out the mask or hide the mask, but on those colors. But you don't want to go too far wide that you're including other things. So close down the threshold. Okay, I'm seeing some mask I'm seeing some of the mask, I'm losing it a little bit, so I'm going to back off, pull it in, and then back off. Okay, I'm going to go to luma, do the same thing, and you can see it's including a lot of the area up top, which I don't care about. I'm only looking at these skirts. No one's going to notice that the color changes on the cyc so much as these skirts that people are watching when they're watching the performers. Okay, so that looks pretty good. All right, so I'm seeing a good representation mask of the skirts. I'm seeing it good on the floor because of the color reflection. That's fine. Now that I've kind of like did a pretty good job on the mask with the saturation luma, I want to go back to hue. So I'm going to adjust to do the same thing, the start and end thresholds of the hue. And I'm not seeing much on the start threshold change. I'm going to do the end. Oh, look at that. I'm getting a better mask there, but I'm including arms. So you got to watch. You don't want to overdo it. But I do want to open that up a little bit to get a better inclusion of the skirts with the mask. So this is the start threshold. Okay, so that looks good. Now we're going to go back to saturation again, play with this some more. Again, this seems like it's taking forever, but once you get the hang of this, you can get through this pretty quickly. That looks better. That looks pretty good. And now if you're the kind of person that likes to play with numbers or type numbers in, that's fine. You can do that. However, if you start dragging, for instance, the star threshold here and the saturation, I'm going to drag, you can see how fast it moves. But if you hold the I think it's the control key down on the keyboard, then you can have you can fine tune it pretty much as if you were dragging this up here to begin with. So it's just simpler really to just simply drag the square. Now the little triangle next to it, that's the softness. I have not really seen much success using that. To me, it's a little bit of a waste of time. They default to 3 on the start and end, and I just kind of leave them alone. If you tend to go too far to the left or right, you'll crush that over. So then you'll notice that the little triangle moves. So you can just simply type the number 3 there to pull that back to its default. Okay, let me go back to here again. Sorry, this is taking a little long. I just want to go over everything. Okay, so look at this girl, these two girls on the left. Let's take a look. Let's unclick the mask and see that. So let's see, can we do a little bit better job there? Let's take a look up here now at the hue. So we've played with the hue. We've kind of we were kind of happy with the way that looked. But if you look up, not below, there's 2 areas, up above and below, you'll notice color. So this one changes the color very, very drastically. We don't want to fool with that. So Control Z to undo. But the line above where you see the little hand up here, click, now you have an arrow. If you drag that, now we're actually adjusting the color on a much more subtler basis. So we're actually honing in on the exact color. So your eyedropper did a good job, but this is just fine-tuning that a little bit more, okay? So you're honing in on that particular shade of red. All right, now the last step would be, I think, just going back again. Let me just unclick this box. That's okay to see the reflection on the floor is okay. And that's pretty good there. This Luma, again, we're going to fuss with. Yeah, see, now I'm getting a better coverage of the mask on those skirts on the left side there without showing arms. We can hit play and just see once they start moving to see if the mask holds up well. I'll look and see if I see some arms. I'm seeing a little bit midriff area, but if you take a look at that by unclicking the show mask box, you'll see that there is that color up here. So it's masking that color, which is what we want to see happen. So how do we change that color? So what you want to do is go down to here inside the secondary color correction section. Below that, you'll see other things. So here under master, not master levels, but under master, you want to look at master hue angle. This is the one where it changes the color. So what we're going to do is just scroll, and you can see where I'm actually changing the colors of those reds. So what we're going to do is just do a slight change in the positive direction. And I have found that 40 worked well with this particular dance. So now you'll notice that the colors are pretty much spot on. Let me just go back and forth here between the tight shots and the wide shot. Okay. Let me go up and undo and redo the color correction effect. So that's before and after. Before and after. And you can see really nice color correction there between the wide shot and the tight shot. So now the viewer, in my mind, doesn't notice that you've actually filmed this scene or any scene you choose, whether it's interviews, plays, whatever. If you've got a situation like me where you have multiple cameras, but they're not all the same model, this is one way that you can color correct your footage and adjust your black levels so the viewer doesn't notice that you filmed this with different cameras. Well, let me show you one more sample. This one's a little trickier. I'm not going to go through all the steps. I just want to show that in this example, here you have the same kind of situation where you have these kind of fuchsia reds, but you also have this sparkly thing going on those tops. So if you'll notice, when I click the mask box here, you'll notice if you take a really good look that I've set up my mask so it does not include those sparkly areas. So you want to make sure if you see something like that where it's not all a solid color, you want to make sure that you don't adjust any of these, whether it's hue, saturation, or luma. You don't want to include those areas where those like silvery white sparkly areas are on those tops. Otherwise, you'll defeat the whole idea of, because when you go to the close-up, you can easily see those sparkly areas are obviously they're not masked, they're a different color. So even though I'm filming an event like this with two cameras that match my NX3s, one that doesn't, my AX100, I film with the AVC HD codec on the NX3s. On the AX100, I film with the AVCS codec. I drop everything into a sequence that's AVC HD, 1920 by 1080 30p. Even with doing those codecs in CS6, I get very good positive results with color correcting using the secondary color correction tool in Adobe Premiere Pro. So I hope this method of showing you how I black balance and color balance my cameras to match these particular color reds, I've explained it enough to help you understand how you could do this on your own, whether it's with Adobe CS6, Adobe Cloud version, or perhaps an NLE of your choice.